Welcome everyone to another in the series of the DEPA board member chats, video chats. Today we have Judy Stark with us. Judy is president of the Panhandle Producers and Royalty Owners Association in Amarillo, Texas. Judy's great, by the way, and anybody that hadn't met her is going to have a friend the first time you do meet her. She's just one of those people, and you'll be able to tell by the time we end this conversation. And Judy was born in Borger, Texas. I did not say Border, Texas. I said Borger, Texas. So she's a Panhandle girl from the beginning, it sounds like. And a little about her background is she grew up in that West Texas Panhandle oil field, so she was familiar with pump jacks and tank batteries and natural gas and natural gas flaring, all of that as a child growing up. And by the time she got to high school, she actually went to work for an independent oil and gas operator. They did some roustabout services, they did well plugging and that kind of thing. And one of the things that she mentioned in her little bio to me is that helped put her through college. So there you go. We all appreciate those wonderful high school jobs that give us that kind of money. That was great. Judy actually moved back to Amarillo in 1994, and she was the terminal manager for Old Dominion Freight in Amarillo and Lubbock. And you have to read that from her bio, because if there's a more male-dominated world than the oil field in service industry, it is the trucking industry. So the fact that she spent 10 years running Old Dominion's freight services out of Amarillo I think that is a real feather in her cap right there. And she's to be congratulated for making it through all that. Back when Wayne Hughes, a lot of us remember Wayne, retired from PPROA, they hired Judy to fill those big shoes, and she's done a marvelous job of that. She's also done some fundraising and that kind of stuff because of her personality and what she does in the Amarillo community. And so welcome, Judy. And before I ask any questions of you, what I do, the first thing out of the box here is say, do you want to say anything, especially after an introduction? You have anything you'd like to say before we start in with some questions?
Well, thank you for that very Judy bio there. It is all true. And I think for me, the biggest thing is that I feel like sometimes I'm a jack of all trades and master of none, but I'll sure give it 110%.
Okay, great. Well, I guess what I would start off with is, we just finished probably one of the most unusual years of 2020 that anybody could have ever imagined. It's not just for oil and gas, but just for the globe. And for people in this country, in energy companies in particular, there's been all kinds of stories. We all know what we've been through. But I kind of like when I'm talking to association folks from around the country, I kind of like to say, so how has it impacted you? And specifically, the Panhandle producers and royalty owners out in the Amarillo area. And what was that like for you guys? And have you as an association had to make some adjustments along the way? And what does that look like?
Well, without a doubt, it's, I think historically for me, as I think a lot of people, this is something we've never seen before. Obviously, a pandemic, a medical pandemic taking over the entire U.S. was, who could predict that? And who could even know how to walk through it? The shutdown was the biggest issue, I think, for not only our industry, but for people in general. Becoming landlocked with our oil and gas and overproduction was devastating. PPROA suffered initially the first several months of the pandemic, and when things started lessening, we did get to have what we called a mini convention, which was the first of its kind, that wound up being very successful. And we did that last September. And I think people at that time, the pandemic or the virus had kind of subsided. And we got together with what I would say it was a fairly decent group of people. You came and spoke at our event. We had about 125 people, which is about 75 to 100 less than what we usually have, but it was a great crowd and we all needed it. We wound up finishing our year out very well. Yes, we had a lot of producer operators that struggled during that time with the same exact things that every producer operator in the entire nation had, particularly those that are small to mid-size. So it was a lot of struggles, but we're coming back.
That's great. It's great. I'm curious, is the bulk of the production in the Panhandle stripper well production?
The majority of it is, yes, this is stripper well country. And when we started drilling back in the early 1920s, in fact, it could have been slightly before that, all of these wells in this area are typically shallow, what we would call a shallow well. And for the many, many years, there were not what you would call any very many deep wells. And of course, we started with Phillips. I'm not know which name they came under because Phillips has had so many names since I've been around. But there was always Chevron Phillips, there was Conoco Phillips, there was Phillips 66. And so they were all E&P. Now the refinery out there is a Phillips 66 refinery. So we have two big refineries in this area. But the majority of our production in this area is stripper wells. And believe it or not, even from those little stripper wells, we produce about 485,000 barrels of oil a month.
Wow.
In this area, yes, we do.
Yeah.
And the oil that is produced in this area is mainly purchased, or probably all purchased for the biggest part, by the Valero refinery and the Phillips 66 refinery in Border. So I would say each one of those refineries probably produce about 180,000 barrels of fuel a day. And that's obviously transported out away from our area, but obviously we keep some here too.
That's right. Well, and the reason for that question and your great response and what the Panhandle producers do is that the Permian Basin gets all the press and worldwide. I mean, it's now, I guess, the largest oil field around, and so it gets an awful lot of the press. And some of the infrastructure problems we've heard about the Permian Basin. So my question would be, I assume that the smaller guys, the smaller producers up in the Panhandle, probably have some of those same infrastructure problems that they have to deal with. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. We have infrastructure problems here in that these fields here are old, extremely old. And there's been very little what I would call new building or new pipeline construction that's gone on. Most of these pipelines are 50, 60, 70 years old. And so, or even older, when you look back at when the first gas well was drilled in the 1920s. So we've got very old infrastructure that has not really been maintained properly. We don't have any what you would call new lines. And so, and because PPROA or our area is not the mini OPEC of Texas, we're we're not the hot spot on the map. And so I think a lot of the companies, whether it may be a pipeline company or that's not where their capital improvements are going. And so that makes it extraordinarily tough for us up here because we need the new pipes, we need repairs, we need compressor repairs, and we need a little help. But the oil and gas is still here. And when some of the larger companies divested themselves to go to the Permian, which we lost a lot of large companies that had been here historically all my life. And so when they divested themselves to go to the Permian Basin, we didn't have anybody having any problems coming in here and buying up production. As people know, it's a lot easier to make money from a smaller production wells or from smaller producers than it is to be one of the what you'd call the big boys. So we still have our problems. We need some good infrastructure. We need some repairs to our pipelines and to compressors, and we need somebody to hold hands with us and make this thing work for everybody. And we can do it.
Yeah, well, kind of along those lines, what about like recruiting new talent in the just number one across the country? Oil and gas isn't the first thing on a lot of young folks' minds. They're, they hear Green New Deal and they're thinking there's going to be a windmill in everybody's backyard and solar panels on top of their cars to make them go down the road. All the crazy stuff that's out there. So they don't really look to oil and gas as like their first choices, I don't think. And again, nothing against the lovely city of Amarillo or the Texas Panhandle, but is it more difficult in kind of being in an isolated area like that as opposed to being in Dallas?
Oh, absolutely. We have those difficulties here in that. What I will say is that the Texas Panhandle is a very conservative area. In fact, I think historically it's the most conservative district. If from the voting standpoint, we're the most conservative district in Texas. What I will say is that more people here understand our industry than they do anywhere else. Now, I'm not going to say we don't have those. I think it's lack of education. And I've got a deep respect for the entities that are putting out what I would call educational programs, because we do have to reach the younger generations. Because yes, we're a dirty name. We hate to say it, but oil and gas has gotten a bad rap. And we have what I love to call thrown behind the runner. We are reactive and not proactive in getting the good that we do. And people do not realize how many products are made from fossil fuels. And you cannot turn that spigot off and replace it with anything that's green.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's one of my pet peeves as well, that all those people that say we're going to do away with oil and gas and we're going to replace everything with electric cars and windmills and solar panels and all, and I just want to slap them in the front of the head with a reality bat to say you just don't understand. You don't understand how things work, and how do you build a windmill? How much rebar goes into the foundation, how much cement goes into the foundation, one of those things, and you can't make those without fossil fuels. So it's just, it is, you're right. It's absolutely an educational effort that's all of our responsibilities. And I'm glad we've got people like you on our side. So that's great. I'm going to step onto something maybe a little bit different here. What about the Texas legislative session? I know it's a biennial session, so I think they're in this year. And so any big issues going on there for you guys?
I'm going to say right now, not for the Texas Panhandle, but one of the biggest issues that's going on is the weather-related Arctic blast that hit. Well, it hit Oklahoma too.
That did.
But the majority of the state of Texas was under ERCOT, and I have seen a myriad amount of bills that believe they have an answer to our Arctic blast. Now, my take on this is, without a doubt, we should never be in a position where we are so close to having a horrible blackout for the majority of the state. And I don't know that legislating things is the answer. Mandating winterization of pipelines and pump jacks or pumping units is the answer, and mandating that to me it's going to be disastrous for any producer operator that would be faced with that. If pipelines winterize or forced to be winterized to a scale that somebody else believes it needs to be, then that's going to be terribly expensive. And then that's going to go back on the producer operator, because typically pipelines, anything that they do goes back to a fee toward the producer operator. Not all of it, but a significant amount of it. But the other thing is, just to winterize would be about $40,000 per unit, and it would devastate the industry. I personally do not know. When you look at 100 years, you're looking at 36,000 days that you had, and you're only looking at just about 2 weeks. This was an anomaly. This is something that is not doesn't happen. And so I think you should prepare for it. You should know what to do with it, but I don't think you legislate it.
Right.
And that's
Well,
just Judy Stark in the Texas Panhandle's opinion.
Okay. Well, I think most of the stuff that I've read said that, you know, what Texas had tried to do was to prepare for those peak usage days in the summer months when it's hot. And
Yes.
And again, when the wind stops blowing, when you're, looking at 40% of your electricity coming from windmills, well, that's not such a great thing either. So, but you don't have the problem with the backup power that you did during the Arctic blast, apparently. So, and actually, and it's something that I think a lot of people have kind of glossed over or lost sight of. Had it not been for natural gas, Texas would have had a much, much larger problem. I mean, that's what actually saved the day, was the natural gas that did come online to keep the grid from failing completely. So
Exactly.
yeah. Hey, let's kind of shift gears maybe to some of the national issues that we're looking at, and I don't know how they're going to, how they might impact your folks out in the Texas Panhandle. But I'll throw a few of them out there, and we'll talk about them. I don't think there's a whole lot of federal lands in the Texas Panhandle, so maybe the Biden administration moratorium on federal leasing doesn't really matter a whole lot out there. And same with the Keystone. Keystone Pipeline's not going to go through the Texas Panhandle, but that was a huge issue as well. Something that I think you probably are paying attention to, that we certainly are as an organization, the Biden promise on the campaign trail of taking away the oil and gas industry subsidies. And we all know what that means. We don't get subsidies. We get tax deductions, and normal business tax deductions that every other business in this country gets. And our IDCs and percentage depletion. Those are our two big ones. And especially for your stripper well operators, that percentage depletion is a big deal. And I know that's, if you're not out there raising money, that's how you roll your money into new projects, is through that percentage depletion usually. So we're fighting that. We're watching. We're assuming that that's coming down the pike. Nothing's been proposed quite yet, but we're assuming that that's going to happen. How about you guys? Are you kind of getting that air in the wind as well?
Absolutely. That's the two biggest things that we're fearful of, is losing those tax incentives. And I absolutely, I'm like you. That's when you start seeing the hair raise up on the back of my neck, is when they call them subsidies, because that is nothing in the world but a tax deduction. We don't get money to produce oil. And so we're on our own. And when it comes to, you do the comparisons of between wind energy and solar, they're actually truly getting subsidies. Those tax incentives that we have are critical. And we also have a great relationship with the National Stripper Well Association in Oklahoma. And certainly we will do anything in the world that we can to keep those costs for those producer operators. It's critical.
Yeah, that's, like I said, that's one of our big issues. I talk every week to our DC guys that are watching those issues for us, and it's it's top on our list. I'll say two things about I think are great. Number one, that Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway famously said, yeah, I'm invested in some wind projects because of the federal government subsidies. That's the only reason you would put money into them. It's because of that. And the other one was once in a congressional meeting in Washington, D.C. I don't know who the congressman or the senator was that we were visiting with. This has been, back in the Obama years, with our chairman, Harold Hamm, and whoever this person was talking about our subsidies, and Harold finally got exasperated, and he said, let me explain the difference between a subsidy and tax deduction. He said, my company once drilled 13, I think the number was 13 dry holes in a row. Nobody wrote me a check. And I just said, okay, that's a great explanation for that and how that works. I don't know if you've been keeping up. We've recently done, DEPA has recently issued a couple of press releases over some of the large national organizations. And now API actually officially last week came out with a new policy supporting a carbon price. And as far as we're concerned, that's just code words for carbon tax. And we have been very strong in the opposition to that. And we did another press release just recently, and we're going to keep beating that drum. I don't know about PPROA and how you guys feel about that.
Well, certainly, I'm very proud to have been named to the board of DEPA. And every time there is a press release, which your one that was just released 2 days ago is, I've held my newsletter up to make sure that press release gets in that newsletter. And but without a doubt, PPROA strategy in January of 2020, right before the pandemic hit, we were headstrong in trying to start educating the people in this area. One of the good things that I think we've got going for us is William Keffer at Texas Tech in Lubbock. He is a big energy guy, and certainly that helps. I think he's working with Senator Perry on a water consortium, and that will be ran out of Texas Tech. So we have some support, I think, here that we don't in other areas. Without a doubt, we do at every turn, we try very, very hard to let people know that if we'd have had another 1,000 wind turbines or we'd have had another 1,000 solar panels, nothing would have been better to have helped our industry during that cold freeze. The biggest thing that our industry has going for it is we have clean, affordable, abundant energy for the world. And it is easily transported, it is easily provided, and it's inexpensive. And the people that are going to be hurt worse by this green energy and the influx of electric cars and solar panels and wind energy are going to be the people that can least afford it. It is going to be people that are lower economically, that their incomes are smaller. They are going to be hurt worse than anybody. And yet oil and gas or natural gas for sure can give that to them at a very inexpensive cost and abundantly. It will not, you're not going to run out of it typically on a cold, even on a cold day. But it's very disheartening. But we wanted to educate the people in our area, and we were going to reach out to the schools, to the colleges here, because that's where it's being hit, is these younger children, even in grade school, are being taught things that are absolutely not true.
You're absolutely right. And I think that's something that gets lost on a lot of folks, is that the least advantaged people among us, the minority communities that are in poor areas all over this country are the ones that get impacted first and hardest whenever energy prices go up. Their percentage of their income that goes to pay their energy bills, whether it's gasoline for their cars or heat or cooling for their homes, it's a bigger portion of their income than it is for middle to upper class folks. And that's just a fact of life. we did one of these little video chats with Henry Cuellar, congressman from South Texas, and he was talking about the great paying jobs and the Eagle Ford down there and all. And I asked him that question about some of this disadvantaged communities in his area, and he said, "You're absolutely right. Yeah, he understands it. He got it that they can be very disadvantaged, and it hits them hard." So that's one of the things I think we've put in the press release you just mentioned. We actually showed some numbers from some European carbon tax examples and how hard it can hit you. So
I'm not convinced that there's a better industry that supplies as many jobs and as many products, worldwide products. So when you're looking at medical facilities, you're looking at the little capsules that go around a Tylenol. When you're looking at the bottom of your shoes or a bicycle seat or the grips or a steering wheel or airplane plastic. If you sit inside an airplane and you look around there, everything that's in that airplane is made from fossil fuels. And I just can't imagine that anywhere in someone's mind that they believe that they could literally replace all of those products and kill an industry over a myth.
what what a great statement, and what a wonderful way to end this interview. That was really good.